For more on this, we want to bring in retired four-star Army General David Petraeus. He served as the CIA Director in the Obama administration and is now with KKR as the chairman of their Global Institute and their Middle East Global Institute. General, thank you for being with us this morning. Give us your thoughts on where we stand right now with this operation.
Well, I thought the Secretary and the Chairman laid this out very effectively, very sober, very forthright, describing the extraordinary number of targets that the Israeli and American forces have hit. And they've been going after everything. Of course, big focus on the retaliatory capabilities, the long-range missiles that can reach Israel, the shorter range that can come across the Gulf and hit our bases and our host nations, and the drones that have proven to be somewhat problematic as well. They detailed the defenses that exist for these, reassuring people, I think, and also laid out, again, the overall objective of doing enormous damage to not just the missile stockpiles, launchers, but even the manufacturing facilities, going after other instruments that can be used to respond to this. Yesterday, for example, we hit a number of the Iranian Navy vessels, going after the drone launch sites as well, and then just a painstaking set of strikes, hundreds and hundreds of them, against the various elements of the security forces, noting that that is a very substantial target, because when you add up all of the regime elements, the security forces that can do what they did to the demonstrators a couple of months ago and killed tens of thousands of them, there's probably 1 million of those. And the big question, I think, now is, as we continue to go after this and continue to reduce, again, these various capabilities further, as was emphasized by the Secretary and the Chairman, the question is, will there be an uprising of some type? Can there be a splintering of the security forces, the regime forces, or will they stay relatively cohesive? Because at the end of the day, we can, in a way, set the conditions for the people and for perhaps some charismatic leader who breaks away and rallies the people and disaffected elements to him. But you can't take down a regime through the air in most cases.
And that was his point, the Secretary of Defense, yes, saying no democracy building exercise here. If those are the objectives, if this is not to be an on the ground war, how long do you think it will take to accomplish those objectives? What are we talking about?
Well, I think that really this briefing, and in fact the president's briefing yesterday, are setting this up for at least a week or possibly two, maybe longer. But keep in mind that there's a constant calculation here about what's called the missile math. Central Command, and I was privileged to command Central Command as well, as you may recall, between Iraq and Afghanistan. Central Command is riveted on the numbers of missiles that the Iranians have left, the number of drones, if we can calculate that as well, and the number of interceptors that we have of all different types. And I thought the chairman did well to lay out that we don't just have the Patriot batteries on the ground together with the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense Systems, throughout the theater as well, but also ships that have essentially ballistic missile defense capabilities. All of this is integrated and together with the host nation capabilities that we have sold to them over the years, and a number of those very effective as well. So that is another concern over time. I think that one of the reasons the 12-day war ended when it did was that quite possibly our Israeli partners were calculating, again, that missile math. And you get a bit nervous at a certain point in time if you think that your missile interceptors might run out before their missiles. That's, of course, why we need to take down as much as we can of that missile force that they have. And again, not just the stockpiles and the launchers, but the very manufacturing facilities as well.
You know, General, I think we're all haunted by that the Iraqis were going to throw flowers at our troops, and they genuinely.
Well, they did for a couple of weeks. To be fair, I was part of the invasion as a two-star too. The problem was we made some catastrophically bad decisions that proved very difficult to overcome.
I was just leading up to whether there are so many dead enders in Iraq. It was just horrifying to watch for years. Is the Revolutionary Guard and the paramilitary forces, is there any way to degrade those to the point where Iranians will be able to come out in the streets without thinking about being killed or picked off by snipers? And because that's the only way this would turn out the way all of us, I think, in the back of our minds, that's what we wish would happen. Is that possible if we don't completely degrade the Revolutionary Guard and what is it, the Basij or whatever it is?
Yeah, the Basij militia, one of the very large elements, are essentially street thugs, well over a couple 100,000 of them alone. That's before they mobilize their reserves. And they're more than willing to not just swing pipes at their fellow citizens, but to shoot them, as we saw as they put down the demonstrations together with the National Police, together with the Revolutionary Guards Corps, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and if necessary, the normal Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and others. So this is a very, very substantial force. And frankly, the question is, will it hang together or not? In such situations in the past, unfortunately, it's generally the guys with the most guns willing to be the most brutal that tend to prevail. We also don't know who will the next supreme leader be. There's a committee that is together of 3 individuals headed by the president, the judicial figure, and a cleric. And then the Assembly of Experts has to come together, have their conclave, and determine who the next supreme leader will be. I don't think it's going to be, a particularly pragmatic figure who might be the Dulce Rodriguez, if you will, to use the Venezuela analogy, figure in Iran. We can hope for that, but I'm not sure that is by any means the base case. And the problem is, of course, the people are essentially unorganized and unarmed. Where is the leader that could bring them together? How could they get weapons? How could they be able to stand against the street thugs, the police, the military, and take them on and ultimately prevail? Could somebody splinter the security forces and point out to them that what this regime has done for them? If you go all the way back to 1979, the rial has been devalued, their currency, 99% since then. This is a country that should be an energy superpower. They're top 2 or 3 in both natural gas and oil reserves. Well-educated population, 92 or 93 million people, and again, should be a mirror image, but much larger of, say, the UAE or Qatar or what have you. And instead, this leadership has driven them into poverty on a national basis and into isolation on an international basis. The problem is that the people really don't get a vote in this case, and that is the reality of the situation.